You're listening to the Lead On podcast, where we discuss experiences in the armed forces while exploring lessons from military leaders.
Hey, good morning. I'm David Deary with the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. Welcome to Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders, our podcast that drops military paydays, 1st and the 15th. Joining me today is an Air Force veteran, Jack Gouge. Jack, good morning. How are you today?
Doing great. How about yourself, David?
Doing great. Here in Southern California, where we had rain the other day, something that's sort of like a blue moon. We don't get it very often, unless we do. Sometimes we'll get weeks and weeks of it, but this year, just a couple of small days. So, Jack, I want to thank you. Thank you for your service. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time. Only the second person from the Air Force that's joined us in podcast land. And before we get going, since we are a leadership-based podcast, and we're going to talk about your favorite, if you will, leadership topic here in a few moments, I'd like to just ask, we give leadership advice all the time as leaders, but people often will wonder, well, what advice were you ever given? Have you ever been given like bad leadership advice, and what's the worst piece of leadership advice that you were ever given?
Yeah, I sure have. And thanks again for having me, David. I think the worst leadership advice I've ever gotten is the old adage that I'm sure you've heard, and that's if you want something done right, do it yourself. And as I've learned through my experiences in the military and otherwise, I've really reflected this is horrible leadership advice. And what I've actually learned is that as a leader, it's not really about what you can do, but it's really all about what you can inspire, enable, and in some cases, just get the heck out of the way and let other people do. And what that requires, I think, is just humility and respecting and valuing the capabilities of the people that you lead.
Yeah, it's so true. And you often read, there's a lot of, definitions out there about leadership or what leadership is, but somewhere in those definitions is usually influence and motivating or inspiring people, influencing them to accomplish a common goal. And humility, such an important trait or quality of a leader. So you spent 8 years in service of our country in the United States Air Force, graduating as an Aggie from Texas A&M, going through the ROTC there. And if you could, yeah, there you go, you got the ring. You got the ring. I got a certificate from a completion of a course I took. No ring though. But I'm still young. Who knows? Maybe one day. So,
That's right.
hey, so what'd you do in the Air Force for those 8 years?
Yeah, I spent 8 years as a special tactics officer. And so for those who don't know, Air Force has a pretty small but growing branch of special operations called special tactics. I think recently rebranded to special warfare. Credit to our Navy brothers for the inspiration there. But in special tactics, really specialize in air-to-ground integration, primarily in the form of airstrikes, airfields. Brief caveat, as we're discussing some anecdotes, specifically in my military career, there are probably some details that I won't be able to elaborate on, but we'll navigate that as we go through.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want any national security secrets. Although I had a very high level clearance, the day after I retired, I dropped down to cleared for rumors. So
There you go. You and me
yeah,
both.
yeah, exactly. So listen, so it's appreciate that caveat, and we don't even really the stories will be on you. So I'm not going to dive deep into ask for details, but touching upon that humility topic. So as a leader in the Air Force, small or large teams. I do kind of just think it's kind of ironic in the military, as you experience in the Air Force. We can get some young troopers, in our early 20s, leading dozens of people, and I come out and I transition and I join the civilian workforce, and I can get people in their 40s excited to have a direct report, and they have 6 people under them, and that's a big deal. So how does humility play into how you lead today? What did you learn? In other words, what leadership or specifically humility that how did you grasp on that topic in the Air Force, and how have you been able to translate that or see that, or do you not see it with what you do as a civilian?
Yeah, great question, David. And so let me kind of back up in my life a little bit to unpack that a little bit. And so the topic of humility is something that's been, really learned over a lifetime of humbling experiences for me. So as a young man, yeah, often I think I felt like I was the smartest person in a lot of rooms that I walked into, which is totally debatable, right? But in retrospect and reflection, I think in often cases, I was just in the wrong room with the wrong people. And kind of as I matured in life, I started seeking other rooms to put myself in, which as a sidebar is kind of ironic because in special tactics, I became familiar with a saying, and that is, if you're the baddest guy in a room, you need to walk into a different room. And that was something that I definitely related to. And so, later in college, as I identified I wanted to go into the Air Force and try out to be a special tactics officer, it required a pretty rigorous selection and assessment process. And the first time I ever tried out to get invited into this job, I failed the PT test on the first time I went to selection, and had to go home with my tail between my legs and really spend some time training, and coming back to the second time to ultimately get assessed and get selected to come back into the career field. So early in life, I think there were some transformational experiences that took me to a place of humility and really valuing the opportunity and the environment that I had the privilege to operate in. So as I came into the Air Force, into special tactics, I found myself in a career field and where I just had to try my hardest every day just to be mediocre. I mean, surrounded by some of the most exceptional human beings in the military and on the planet. And by nature of the way that the special tactics assessment and selection process worked, I actually went through the entire 2-year training pipeline right alongside these guys. So I had the same training, had the same knowledge, but really they didn't need a guy who knew how to do it all, who could be side by side, at the front of the pack with them. What these high performers really needed was enablement and to just get out of the way. So, as a quick anecdote, to kind of elaborate on this, very first deployment to Afghanistan, I'm a young lieutenant, and we're running an airfield in support of a combat operation, and our job is to facilitate the movement of personnel, potentially casualties, and the worst case scenario is realize we have a casualty in the operation. Now, in that moment of crisis, everything is focused on this airfield we're at to facilitate getting this casualty via helicopter to the airfield, transloaded onto the back of a C-130 into higher level medical care within a critical 60 minutes. In that moment, I had 3 radios with higher headquarters talking to me, wanting to know what's going on, an inbound helicopter passing an update on the casualty, and the C-130 and medical crew ready to receive this. And I'm sitting there with a helmet fire with 3 radios trying to talk all 3, while all my guys were standing around me saying, "Hey, what do you want us to do? Like, how can we help?" And I very easily in that moment could have handed off one of those radios and asked for help and leveraged some of the talent I had around me. But I didn't. I got this, guys, and I had it. And in retrospect, really could have shaved some critical minutes off of the transfer of that casualty had I simply leveraged the people around me. So that was one key learning experience from my military career.
Yeah, and it's funny you commented about exceptional humans, and what a humble statement, because you yourself, if you went through the 2 years of training and you guys all came together and bonded as a team, well, you're an exceptional person too to be included in that. But yet you take the focus off of you, which is what a humble leader will often do. And I read recently that um, humble leaders tend to be, and I experienced this. Let me back up real quickly. So, one of our leadership classes with the Enlisted Leadership Foundation, we call Foundry. A foundry is a thing that shapes, you melt down mold metal and you form it and shape it. And that's kind of what it is we want you to come to the foundry, and we want to melt down your perception of leadership, oftentimes as a positional leader, because we do a great job in the military of teaching us how to be positional leaders. But then we want to form you into a relational leader. And what we have found after almost 18, we have our 18th class uh, next month. And but what we found is a vast majority, over 50% of our students that attend this class, they're introverted, quiet, humble leaders. They're not overly charismatic. And I don't know if you experienced this in the Air Force. I certainly experienced it in the Navy. Guilty of it, of of gravitating towards those charismatic, boisterous, out in front, and assuming that they are the most competent of leaders without assessing and looking at any kind of track record of performance and success to measure just the fact that wow, they're always volunteering, they're always out there. Man, just who people want to gravitate towards. And what I've learned and I've read as well is humble leaders tend to be reserved and quiet, but some of the most competent as well as the best when it comes to building teams. And the number one reason, and you alluded to it with that example, is humble leaders are willing to listen to and accept feedback and advice. So, as you reflected on having those three radios, um, did somebody comment after the fact, hey, Lieutenant, you could have let me help? Or does that something, because we do that, right? In the military, we always assess the situation after the fact. Let's go in and see what we could have done better. Or did you just kind of figure this out?
No, there was definitely some feedback from my team, and it wasn't as soft or as polite as you just put it. So yeah, we debriefed after the fact, and my guys definitely put it to me.
Okay.
But you know, one of the great things I think about, and I think this is really unique to the military, is the enlisted officer dynamic. And it's really easy as a charismatic young lieutenant to fall in that trap that you just described. But there's this awesome setup in the military where you have a senior enlisted advisor right next to you in any command position, advising you with all the experience and all the knowledge to make the right decisions. And it doesn't require that you have to be the guy with all the answers, or the guy out front with all three radios, solving the problem by yourself. So, that dynamic that you're describing there, especially the enlisted officer dynamic, is something I really benefited from in my time in the military. And a funny sidebar, David. My very first combat operation that I ever went on in the military, I was I was driving down the flight line. One of my NCOs, who was a mentor to me, was driving me down the flight line to go to the compound of this Army Special Forces team that I was supporting, about to go out on mission with. Hey, sir, you ready? You excited? Yeah, I'm pumped. This is great. I'm super excited about it. First combat operation. Like, okay, cool. You know all your stuff. You have everything you need. You got everything. Yep, I got everything. I'm ready to go. And he looks over at me and looks down and says, "Hey, where's your rifle?" I said,
Oh,
"That's a great question. Can we turn around and
wow.
head back to our compound really quick? I think I forgot something." But definitely benefited from having that enlisted advice in that circumstance.
In the Navy, um, when we promote from E6 to E7, from first class petty officer to chief petty officer, and the Coast Guard also does this, but it's a significant promotion, unlike any other branch of the military. And when I made chief back in last century, they said the number one rule that they gave us four rules, but the number one rule of the chief was to train your division officer, which O1s, O2s. And in fact, I would, no offense to those that may be listening to this, but as a command master chief, I would tell people that my division officer is my executive officer. Although I'm the command master chief or a command chief, we're the advisors to the commanding officer. But I'm always training that executive officer, hopefully in such a way that that individual is listening to their senior enlisted leader when the time comes. Uh, but I had a young O1 as a young chief petty officer. Here I am. Okay, I got this charge to train division officers. I'm going to take care of my divo, and this guy would not listen to me. I would ask to go with him when we needed to talk to the captain, and no, I got this. And I would try to tell him, okay, well, make sure you talk. This is how you. And eventually, the captain got so mad at this guy. He said, "You're not allowed to come to me anymore without your chief." And I would even say that in my limited experience as a civilian, I think that is a quality in a chain of command that I think civilian organizations could really benefit from. Because, going back to humble leaders, if they're unwilling to accept feedback or they have a culture at an organization that nobody can pull the CEO aside or the boss and say, hey, this is what I hear in the deck plates. This is what you may be transmitting, but this is what's being received. And now we're talking in the military, we're talking lives, but in civilians, it's lives and dollars and things like that. I don't know. Do you as a civilian and working in industry, do you experience this, or do you see positional leaders just like we did in the military? It's like, yeah, we'll see how long this person lasts. See if they get promoted out of their position.
Yeah, you bet. And so, yeah, after the military transition to a small tech company called Amazon.com that I work at currently, and I'm the technical program manager on the team that releases the Amazon mobile shopping app.
Oh, I was
Um,
on it yesterday. Thank you for that.
yeah, yeah, thank you for your business.
Yeah.
Um, but I've definitely seen this in the private sector as well. And up to this point, I think a lot of this we've talked about from a stance of, at least speaking personally, a lot of times leaders can be arrogant, right? To think that we know everything and we're the right guy. But I think there's also another trap that leaders can fall into that's not necessarily also rooted in arrogance, and it's the fact that as leaders, oftentimes we have a natural proclivity to feel like we need to have all the answers. Like as the positional leader, people are looking to us for guidance, and we need to know everything and be able to have the answer. And I've really learned this. I learned it in the military through humility, and I've also learned it at Amazon through my experiences. This is a total fallacy, and that really you can do so much more as a leader when you recognize the strengths, the knowledge and the skills of the people around you and the people that are advising you and people that are pulling you aside, and pair them with the right problem to get things done. And in my job at Amazon, releasing one of the largest shopping apps on the planet, I literally would not be capable of accomplishing this task on my own, just with the sheer magnitude and scale of it. In fact, nobody would. But beyond that, I don't even come close to having the knowledge and skill sets necessary to do it. So when I first joined Amazon, I joined a team focused on cyber threat intelligence, so cybersecurity. And the first meeting I walked into, and people started discussing, the topics at hand, hearing terms like cross-site scripting and SQL injection and DNS spoofing. I mean, my notebook had so many question marks in my notes written down. It was embarrassing. I was a true fish out of water in this environment. And so, I bring that up because what it has forced me to do as a leader and a manager of programs and projects and people is to not rely on my own wit and critical thinking ability to get things done, but really lean on the people around me and capitalize on their skills and abilities to get things done. And I think that's when you really unlock the most potential as a leader, when it's not just about you, but it's about all the people around you.
We read and hear a lot about authenticism today. And people can tell if you're not being authentic, if you're just being witty and you're insecure and you're trying to fake it till you make it. People see through that. And when you're the leader, part of a team, that's disruptive to the team, and they will put you on the outside. John Maxwell actually has a book, Leaders Ask Good Questions. They really, is there stupid questions? Yes. But I'd rather ask a stupid question and be the only person in the room that doesn't know something than look stupid, because I didn't ask the question, and that reflects negatively on the whole team.
Yeah,
Um,
you and me both.
right? It's the whole humility aspect of leadership, putting others first, taking in feedback, getting to know you. You talked about getting to know your team so that when you're positioning people in the right spot. I remember on a ship one time, and my leading petty officer, which is an E6, and we had about a dozen people, and he was assigning people to different responsibilities, and he was putting this one person in charge of people, which was the wrong person. I said, no, wait, and you want to let people. What I love about the military is we're always in a training environment, right? 95% of what we do is training, and we train so much so that those last 5%, when we have to execute real, it's just ingrained and it just happens. And he was trying to assign this one person this job. And I'm like, no, you can't put that guy there. He said, well, that's the bill he's assigned for. That's why he has to be here. I said, the thing is, you're going to set him up for failure and everybody else. He is a great individual that can do your administrative, keeping all your files. He does not lead people, he leads himself. He can do really well with admin skills. He's not a people person. You see it in his countenance, his self confidence disappears. He just doesn't have it. And I ultimately had to order the first class to, like, you're not going to put him there. Let's move on. And later he came back and said, you were right. The guy thrived in this position. So, but without building the relationship with people to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, to build some trust, because if you don't build relationships, they won't trust you. Then you won't be able to learn this stuff. So, and part of that is humility as a leader, is humble yourself to be transparent so that people will be transparent back. Well, Jack, I really appreciate this conversation with you today. We're just about out of time. But in closing, I open things up with a piece of leadership advice, the worst piece. Let me just ask you, is there any, do you ever make a leadership decision that, man, you're lucky you dodged a bullet, other than forgetting your weapon? That's one. Uh, but that's, but did you ever, whether it's as military or civilian, give a bad piece of leadership advice yourself to somebody, but you guys it turned out okay?
Yeah, David, too many to count, but one stands out, and this is probably one of those anecdotes where, as promised, I might omit a few details, right? But it doesn't change the impact of the story. So some years ago, I was leading a reconnaissance operation in a country, and our mission was to go in and scout out this airfield to use in a upcoming hostage rescue. So we had done our due diligence in advance of this operation to coordinate with some of our local liaisons, get an idea of who was there. We were told no one's at this airfield. So we're expecting to go in the middle of the night, land in helicopters, go in, do our assessment, and leave. So as we're flying in to do this reconnaissance operation, it comes to my attention as the leader of this operation, hey, there's people on this airfield. There's a lot, and they're armed. Uh, and so in that moment, I made a judgment call. I said, based on the context of the situation, the contacts that we've had, hey, I think these are local nation friendly military forces. We're going to go in anyways. Now, anybody who's ever gone in on military, you have very strict criteria on what's considered in this a cherry HLC. Hey, this many armed people, we're not going to go in. We're gonna go back. We're going to reassess. This met that criteria, but I made, which was a bad decision. Hey, we're going to go in anyway. So we land, we go in, we approach these people with our interpreter, and lo and behold, turns out I was right. Judgment call was right. They were local nation military. No problem with us being there. Till their leader comes out, and he's not happy that we showed up unannounced. And we exchanged words via interpreter. He steps away on the phone. About this time, we have a gunship overhead that says, hey, you have an armed convoy of technical vehicles a couple miles away approaching. And if anyone doesn't know what a technical vehicle is, it's a Hilux pickup with a heavy machine gun mounted in the back. Hey, you got 4 or 5 of these and a long convoy of vehicles heading your way. So we pull this leader back over, like, hey, what's going on? And said, hey, I contacted the local government agency authority in his militia, and he's coming over here to talk to you. Like, okay, we'll see how this plays out. So here we are standing on this airfield, surrounded by all this heavy weaponry, 50 plus armed guys having it out with this local government agency chief who's also not happy that we're there. He steps away on the phone. Okay, and so as all this is going on, I'm kind of mediating this conflict at this point. Said my team, hey, get the job done. I don't know how long we're gonna be able to be here, and they're off working, doing their respective duties. And he comes back on the phone, hands the phone to our interpreter, and he kind of has this ghost-like look on his face. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm talking to the vice president of this country.
Oh
he,
no.
he says, oh my goodness, this is going south. Vice President Country says, hey, we're really glad you're here. Welcome. Hey, I've told my guys to secure the entire place. You stay as long as you want, and we'll make sure that you have no issues while you're there. Thank you so much. Let us know if you need anything.
Oh
And so
wow.
the whole thing turned out positively, and we accomplished what we needed to. I turned around. Like, well, Jack, what does this have to do with anything about humility and enabling other people? The entire time I'm heads down, so to say, liaising and mediating this issue with the people there. And my team accomplished the mission, got the job done completely without me. And they had roadblocks and hiccups and challenges while they're doing it. They problem solved, they figured it out. I was completely unneeded other than just to be focused on this one problem. And that really just ingrained in me that as a leader, David, again, it's not about what you can do, but what you can do to inspire and enable. And in this lucky circumstance, I just had to get out of the way and let my guys accomplish the mission. But hey, going in there was a bad call, but it worked out in the end.
That's awesome, man. What a great story. Well, you've been listening to Jack Gouge, Air Force officer, did 8 years in the Air Force, graduate of Texas A&M. Jack, once again, I want to thank you for giving us a few minutes of your time, talking to us about humility and, more importantly, service to our country.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, David.
Once again, this has been the Enlisted Leadership Foundation's podcast, Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders. I'm David Deary, President of the Enlisted Leadership Foundation. You can learn more about us in our leadership classes for enlisted military, where we're building America's leaders. Visit our website, www.enlistedleadershipfoundation.org. See you next time on the 1st and the 15th, military paydays, with the next edition of Lead On, Lessons from Military Leaders.